Real estate investing can bring big reward and big risks. So know your risks. Welcome to the Real Estate Risk Report, the show for real-world insight on real estate investment risk. Now, here's your host, Lance Pederson.
Thank you for joining the Real Estate Risk Report. I'm your host, as always, Lance Pederson. So today I have with me my good friend, Frank Giudici with Bedford Cost Segregation. How you doing, Frank?
Awesome. Pleasure to be here. Thanks, Lance.
Yeah, no, glad we were able to get you on. Today, this is a topic that's coming up. I think more and more people are becoming familiar with this. Obviously, investing in real estate for many is its tax efficiency, right? So I think that, a lot of things we're going to cover in today's episode, point to the fact that not everyone's taking advantage of all of the benefits that they could be taking advantage of and should be, right? There's a lot of complexity that comes along with sort of partnership accounting in general. So as to not taking advantage of all of the benefits that it affords you seems a bit short-sighted. So before we get into all that fun stuff, where Frank and I nerd out on this stuff all the time, and we'll try to put the cookies on the bottom shelf for everyone at home. But why don't you share with the audience sort of how you got into this? How did you get into the real estate biz? How did you end up sort of landing at Bedford and becoming sort of the passionate evangelist for cost segregation?
As with probably a lot of people that you have on this podcast, it was in a roundabout manner. But I'm a civil engineer by degree. I spent 15 years in the construction management industry. From project engineer to project manager to finally procurement manager. And really, I essentially know the ins and outs of commercial large-scale construction from K through 12 to high-rise office buildings, high-rise luxury apartments, and even, in your neck of the woods, it's very popular, nanotech manufacturing facilities. So, it's what kind of gave me the background, the foundation of not necessarily real estate, but certainly how it's built and all the steps that need to be taken in order to be on time and under budget. And really, Lance, I just got to a point where I was burnt out and I was looking for other options. And I actually own multifamily properties on the side. And I was at this real estate conference and bumped into a gentleman who started talking about cost segregation. And I was just mind blown because I just thought it was too good to be true, which is a common reaction I get. And so he started talking to me about it. And I said, wow, this is something I need to explore. And certainly, upon exploring further, it was legit, right? This is a legit mechanism, tax strategy to literally offset taxable income that you're generating on your commercial real estate. When I say commercial real estate, I use that loosely. It's any sort of income producing property, whether it's residential use or commercial use. But bottom line is, I just was so enamored by this industry that I started kind of looking around at who the heavy hitters were. And Bedford Cost Segregation just so happened to be probably number one, number two largest independently owned cost seg providers in the country. And their headquarters was only a couple hundred miles from where I live. So I reached out just on a whim. I reached out to the managing partner and Greg Bryant, and I just started a conversation and literally just hit the ground running. And now I'm the Northeast Business Development Director for them. And it's just, I spend a lot of time on the phone, much like you, I'm sure, and over email, just educating clients on how it works. I love what I do, Lance. I know it's like you said in the beginning, we get all geeked out about what we do. And I just love bringing the value add that we bring to clients.
Yeah, no.
So that's my background.
Starting with that, then, right? Like you see, that's a guy who comes from the engineering side, which is where the magic happens, obviously, as we'll get into here with these studies. But and then getting into it, it's the benefits that it can accrue to you. So why don't we just start with, I guess, once again, the spirit of cookies on the bottom shelf.
Yep.
Let's just take your average investor who's investing into a real estate syndication. We'll just use multifamily as an example because I think people, it's easier to get their minds wrapped around. But like you said, it could be any kind of real estate. Really, what are the mechanics? What what's happening? What is the IRS allowing people to do? Once again, but dead simple stuff. What is the cost segregation study doing? So share what would happen if you didn't do it, and then what happens when you do the study, and how those benefits flow through to that end user, investor, that member or partner LP of the partnership. Yep.
Yeah, bottom line is this is a tax strategy that was stamped by approval by the IRS in 2004. It had existed since 1986, okay? Literally had been around since 1986, but it wasn't until 2004 that the IRS said, okay, it's legit, but you have to do it like this. And then there was, basically the rule book on how to go about doing a proper cost segregation study. So, bottom line is, when people own commercial real estate, whether it's commercial use or residential use, they're generating income. That's why people buy commercial real estate, right? So in the multifamily world, where it's very popular, multifamily syndicators have general partners, limited partners. The limited partners are considered passive investors. When they buy a multifamily property, everybody who's part of that deal is getting a cut. They're getting income generated, okay? And so that income, let's face it, the IRS always wants their piece of the pie, right? So you're going to be taxed on the income generated. Now, there's a couple of different things that, people need to understand, talking about cookies on the bottom shelf. When I mention general partners and limited partners, the general partners are usually the ones who they work in real estate day in and day out, okay? And they are the key cog that goes out and finds the deal, finances the deal, all that stuff, okay? Those general partners are usually considered real estate professionals, okay? That's a key term that the IRS, so think of real estate professionals, general partners. Then there's the limited partners, who are the passive investors. And typically the passive investors are not real estate professionals. So there's two different types of income that flow down. It's all income, right? But the passive investors end up collecting what's called passive income from that multifamily property. And the general partners, who are real estate professionals, that's considered non-passive income to them. Or actually, I take that back. It's all passive income, but they get to treat it as if it's non-passive income. Mm-hmm. So there's two different types of income that's floating around here, but either way, it's income that you have to pay taxes on. So when you do a cost segregation study, you're basically generating accelerated depreciation deductions, because all commercial real estate, whether it's residential use or commercial use, it's depreciable. And so that depreciation is a deduction at the end of every year, and deductions are good. Mm-hmm. So the problem is, Lance, as you know, the standard annual depreciation deduction on commercial real estate without cost segregation is only about 2.5 to 3.6%. That's it. Of the total depreciable basis, you're just getting a sliver of annual depreciation. By doing a cost segregation study, you're basically generating, especially in times of 100% bonus depreciation, which is a big buzzword these days, you're going to get anywhere from 10% all the way up to 50% of a depreciation deduction all in year one. So now you have all these deductions that you've generated in year one, and those deductions get split up based on how the contract was written through that multifamily syndicatorship. And that each passive investor will typically get a slice of that pie, and then the general partners will get. So the bottom line is, cost segregation gives you the ability to capitalize on accelerated depreciation deductions that you can then use to offset that passive income, that check that you're getting quarterly, whatever it is, from the syndicatorship. You now have a bucket of losses called depreciation deductions that you can utilize to offset that income, and now you're paying zero taxes on that income to the IRS. So that's why multifamily syndicators love using cost segregation, because they can pass along those accelerated depreciation deductions, and they can allow their passive investors to utilize those deductions to offset the income that's generated, and it's free money. So now it's even more incentive as a passive investor to, and again, a lot of passive investors don't want the headache of being responsible for the property, right? And finding the property and maintaining it and tenants and leases and all that stuff, which is the beautiful thing of being a passive investor. You don't have to deal with that headache, but you can still take advantage of the benefit of getting that income generated quarterly, monthly, however it's done. And now I'm giving people the mechanism to offset that income so that they're not paying taxes on it. So it's a win-win-win for everybody.
Yeah, I agree. And then the mechanics with, so I want to touch on this, the bonus depreciation thing. I just want to set this over on the side for a minute. But what really is happening under the hood is that when you guys go and do this study, is that you're looking at that there's this building and it has fixtures and it has all these other, it's not just because, you'd say broadly there's dirt, land value, and then there's structure that has value. And then it's the structure value that you take a straight line, whatever the basis is, 27 and a half years or 39 years or whatever it is. And it's just, take a little bit every year and depreciate it over time. But what you guys are doing is going in and taking inventory of all of the light fixtures and the toilets and the all of those sorts of things. Is that right? And that's sort of what the study ends up line item detail, which is then personal property. Is that what's happening? And then you can depreciate faster, or how does that work?
Yeah. So, and again, I just kind of glazed over all that because I'm just, the reason you do cost segregation is to generate these depreciation deductions, and deductions are good. But let's drill down the next layer. So how are we able to do this, right? How are we able to justify to the IRS that you can get 10, 50% of the total depreciable basis of your building all in year one? So this is the nature of cost segregation. Every piece of commercial real estate, when it's acquired or built new, there's always on a depreciation schedule, there's at a minimum 2 line items. There's building and there's land. Building is depreciable, land is not depreciable. So there's 2 buckets of money with every piece of property. The bucket we deal with is the building bucket, because the building bucket is what's depreciable, right? So what we basically do is we go into that building bucket and we have to essentially engineer, model what that building is in actuality, the structure, the foundation. We break a building down into all its components, okay? Literally from structure to exterior envelope to mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems, and then all the finishes within. We break every building down into all the various components. And then, per the IRS tax law, you're allowed to segregate what's called personal property and land improvements. So what we're doing is we're creating 2 more buckets to put on that depreciation schedule. So now every depreciation schedule with a cost seg study will have building, land, personal property, land improvements. And the beautiful thing about segregating into personal property and land improvements is because personal property buckets depreciate over 5 years or 7 years, depending on the property use. And then land improvement buckets depreciate over 15 years. And so now you're probably saying, okay, that's great, but that's compared to what? So let's take a step back. That building line item I referred to, all buildings or what are considered real property, all real property depreciates in one of 2 time frames. If it's a commercial use building, it depreciates over 39 years. If it's a residential use building, which all multifamilies are, a residential use building depreciates in 27 and a half. So again, you've got your choice. Do you want to depreciate your building over 27 and a half or 39 years? Or do you want to give, a cost segregation provider the opportunity to segregate out personal property and land improvements, which are 5, 7, and 15 years? And so naturally, let's just talk about this. Lance, you have $100. Do you want to depreciate that $100 over 27 and a half years, which means you're going to take 100 and divide it by 27 and a half, and that's the sliver that you're going to take every year for the next 27 and a half years? Or Lance, do you want to depreciate that $100 over 5 years, where you're going to get $20 per year? So, that's just a very simple example with a very low dollar amount. But the whole point is, do you want to take a $2.75, annual depreciation deduction a year, or do you want to take a $20 annual depreciation deduction a year over 5 years? So this is the concept. We break buildings down into all their components, and then using the letter of the law, we go through and we pick out or segregate personal property and land improvement. And by doing that, we're naturally building two more buckets that depreciate faster, and you can capitalize on that. And it's also one of the biggest misnomers of my industry is that it's retroactive. So for people who acquired, built new, or significantly renovated their commercial real estate over the past 20 years, the IRS allows cost seg providers to do a study today on a property that was purchased, built new, or significantly renovated up to 20 years ago. And they allow that client or they allow that person, the owner of that property, to catch up on all the missed accelerated depreciation deductions they didn't know that they were sitting on. And you get to claim them all in the current tax year, and you don't have to amend all your previous tax returns. So this is not just a tax strategy that people should use going forward, but for people with portfolios of real estate, it's something that they can utilize retroactively. They can go back and catch up on all the missed accelerated depreciation deductions. So, that's going one level, deeper, I guess.
Yeah, no, but that's helpful. I mean, that's just it. It's not just that time of acquisition. You can do it. If you didn't do it, you can do it. And once again, a lot of these real estate syndications, I think the other thing that people realize is that the hold period, they're probably not going to hold it for that long. I mean, it's going to be 5 years or 7 years or something like that. So
Sure.
Getting that benefit sooner and accelerating that forward so that the IRS, because that's basically what it's doing is that you've got income being allocated to you and then distributions going out. The depreciation serves as an expense to reduce what amounts to taxable income. And Now you've got a more tax efficient return, right? Whereas some investments you make, they don't have the benefit of appreciation. So Uncle Sam is kind of like, well, you got this much in cash, you got this much in income, and they're going to want, it's the last dollar that's the highest tax bracket it's going to be exposed to. So if you're a high income earner, then it's not so great because now all of a sudden between the feds and the state government and et cetera,
40%,
40%, right? Like that's not very fun. Whereas this is sort of what this can do now. This maybe as a segue then is into this. Let's take this bonus depreciation thing and because I know you talk about the CARES Act, and so there's some other wrinkle that's in play as we speak that's part of what we just talked about. Maybe you can get us up to speed on what is that? What is this sort of bonus depreciation thing? And it sounds fun. I love the word bonus, but
Yeah, and quite honestly, bonus is a little bit of a deceiving word to use. But it's and here's what I'll say: love him or hate him, President Trump enacted what was called the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in December of 2017, and it was part of that Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that basically incorporated 100% bonus depreciation. And the biggest difference maker, and I guess let me back up. What is bonus depreciation? Bonus depreciation is a mechanism. It was originally enacted in the early 2000s to incentivize commercial real estate owners to basically build new or renovate existing. It was trying to put hard hats back to work. So this was a financial incentive for developers to build more and renovate more. And the incentive was this: once they did that new construction or renovation, they were allowed to claim what's called bonus depreciation on any eligible property. So what was eligible property? So eligible property was any property that had a class life of 20 years or less. So now you're kind of scratching your head, right? Because you're saying, okay, where's the big perk in claiming bonus depreciation if the property has to be 20 years or less? Because if you built something new or renovated something, you just got done telling me, Frank, that it either depreciates in 39 years or 27 and a half years. Both 27 and a half and 39 are greater than 20. So that means I can't take advantage of it. Well, introduce cost segregation, right? Now cost segregation comes into play. And what does cost segregation do? Cost segregation justifies 5, 7, and 15-year property. 5, 7, and 15-year property is all 20 years or less. And now all of a sudden, it becomes eligible for bonus depreciation. So now you're saying, okay, I kind of can wrap my head around that. So what's the deal? I hear 50% bonus, I hear 80% bonus, and now I hear 100% bonus. So what does that mean? What that means is you're now allowed to claim 100% of the value of all property that's 20 years or less in year one. Think about that. You do a cost segregation study on $1 million property, okay? The depreciable basis is $1 million. Brand new construction, $1 million, right? Because that was the original caveat, was that you had to have new construction or renovation of an existing. So that $1 million of depreciable basis, let's say you do cost segregation study and you generate 20% yield. So you're saying, what does 20% yield mean? That means 20% of that $1 million depreciable basis can be segregated into 5, 7, and 15-year buckets. So 20% of $1 million, $200,000. Well, now, in times of 100% bonus, that entire $200,000 can be claimed in year one of that property being placed in service. So that's just the general gist of how bonus works. But now let me go one step further. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, not only did it increase bonus depreciation up to 100% from 50%, so it increased it 50%, so now it's 100%. The other incentive here is that it now allows bonus depreciation to be claimed on acquired property. That's huge, because now people don't have to build new or renovate existing in order to take advantage of bonus. All they simply have to do is buy a property. If you acquire a property, it is now eligible for bonus. So the bottom line is, when you take bonus depreciation, the new rules, and you combine it with cost segregation, it's a huge game changer. And so that's the power of cost segregation with today's legislature. Now, I do want to point out that was December of 2017. So the timeline for 100% bonus is September 27th of 2017. Any properties acquired, built new, or renovated September 27th of 2017 all the way through December 31st of 2022 are 100% bonus eligible. So, and then, it phases down 20%. So if the property gets acquired January 1st of 2023, technically it now becomes 80% bonus eligible. And then in 2024, it's 60%. So it steps down 20%. But, here's the big thing that I should probably bring up. A new administration just took over, right, Lance? And let's face it, there's certainly some agita between the old legislation and the new legislation, and how that Tax Cuts and Jobs Act changed things. So there's a little bit of there's some murmurings out there that bonus depreciation may change. So what I've been trying to just tell people is, take advantage while the rules are in place as they currently stand, and understand, and this is why we're here, right? To educate the populace on the type of tax strategies you can utilize to offset your income, because that's the name of the game.
Yeah, I mean, because it's there for the take, and that's just it. And now, and once again, the flip side of it is that, on disposition of the asset, there'll be some recapture, right? But the benefit of it is that will be, on the recapture side, it's going to be a capital gains tax rate, not as ordinary income, right? So you're playing that arbitrage between what, how the dollars get taxed. I mean, the IRS always wins. Ultimately, they're going to get it one way or the other, right? But in the short run, it's like, you'd rather, you want your cash today, you want it today, right?
It's time value of money. It's time value of money, and that's what I tell people. I'm not here to try to smoke and mirrors people. Cost segregation is a tax deferral strategy. Okay, it's not getting you any more depreciation in total. Once you buy a building or once you build a building, the depreciable basis is a depreciable basis. The name of the game becomes how quickly can you depreciate it. And so the quicker you can depreciate it, generate those deductions to offset income, it's the time value of money. The more money you have now in cash flow to be able to acquire something with it or renovate or whatever, it's just a time value of money game. And that's what cost segregation is. It allows people to generate that cash flow today rather than pay Uncle Sam.
Yep. And then even to point out too is that, as you mentioned, like the general partner and the limited partner relationship is that, so for those limited partners who aren't considered real estate professionals per the IRS definition, any of this bonus depreciation, because you can kind of sense that there's a good chance that there may be so much depreciation coming through, especially in year one, it's going to offset all of the income and more. So if you're not a real estate professional, those losses can carry forward in on that particular investment into the subsequent years. So Correct. It's not like it's lost. And this is where some people, I think, when you start to really dig into this stuff, it may make sense for, let's say a husband and wife. Let's say the husband's a neurosurgeon and, he works a lot of hours and whatever. His wife's a stay-at-home mom, but, likes HGTV and dabbles in whatever. Some of these people, you see them, the spouse, it could flip, whatever. Like one of the spouses ends up, they buy a few single-family rentals, and they do enough to, once again, you have to dig into this, but basically if you can get one of the spouses to sort of qualify as a real estate professional, whether they're a real estate agent or whatever, and they qualify for that status, then Right. You can start to use that depreciation benefit that offsets all of the income, and you can use that to then offset some of the ordinary income in other places, right? So
it gets very juicy, Lance. And this is the reason why people want to work with professionals like you, right? Because you know the ins and outs. And that's why when people say, oh yeah, I have a CPA, and it's like, well, does your CPA know real estate, commercial real estate? Because there's a bunch of strategies. So you want to make sure, if you feel like you're going down the commercial real estate path, you want to make sure you have a CPA who knows the ins and outs of commercial real estate and the tax strategies to take advantage. Because like you said, that neurosurgeon, that W-2 income that neurosurgeon is getting is considered is non-passive income, non-passive or active. It's his primary source of income. And the stay-at-home mom or stay-at-home dad who becomes the real estate professional on the side because they're managing the multifamilies that they own, and they're dealing with the maintenance and the tenants and the financing and all this other stuff. If they can get that real estate professional status, now all of a sudden it only requires one person in a joint return to be a real estate professional. And once that one person becomes a real estate professional, you're now able to utilize those accelerated depreciation deductions from real estate to offset the neurosurgeon's non-passive income. So it gets really, really juicy. And this is the game. That's why these GPs are GPs, because they know that being a real estate professional, their significant others who are neurosurgeons, they're going to be able to utilize all these accelerated depreciation deductions from these multifamilies that they're buying, and they're going to wipe out the entire taxable income of their spouse. They're paying $0 to Uncle Sam. And like you stated, it's not a use it or lose it. I could generate $1 million of depreciation deductions. You only may need $100,000. The other $900,000 of depreciation deductions just carries forward into the next year until you can continue to chip away at it. So it's really a powerful, powerful mechanism.
Yeah, I agree. And this is one of the things that we're doing is this, unfortunately, this depreciation benefit is misunderstood, as you well know, amongst even the active investors, the sponsors of these deals, the operators. And then, not to mention, then because of their misunderstanding of the power of depreciation. I mean, of course, all of them will mention it, right, and at the surface level. But then the visibility that they give their LPs into what that is during the tax year is usually non-existent, right? So what happens? This is one of the things we're trying to change, and why we have on the Verivest side now a partnership tax practice is to give that visibility during the current year. Because the benefits there, like you said, I mean, you know, if you've done the cost seg study, you don't have to wait for the year to be over to figure out what the depreciation is. Like that's a solved problem, right? So what happens is that all the real estate, all the operators, they don't throw the financials over to their CPAs until the year's over, and then and then it hits the K1. So my whole passion is like that's silly, like. The benefit should be visible when the investor logs into the portal to look at that investment. They should see not only how much net income was allocated to me, and not only how much distributions were sent to me, but I should be able to see how much depreciation is being allocated to me, right? Because like you said, it's usually for the sake of it's just pro rata. I mean, it's a pro rata thing, right? It's like you get your sliver of, like you called it, of whatever it is. So we might as well give you visibility throughout the year so that you can, and then of course, with all these investments that you had, the ability to roll it up to see the totality of it, right? On a specific investment, if you are a real estate professional, to see how much, because that's like tax planning, but no one, I mean, that's just my frustration is that it's hard to do tax planning when the tax year is over. Right? Like, how do you do tax planning in February or March? Like, there's not much you can do now. It's too late. Right? You can't make moves. You can't do.
It's reactive instead of proactive, and that's what you're trying to curb. You're trying to be proactive instead of reactive, and everybody falls into the reactive state. So like you said, I mean, it's important that passive investors and people in general understand how it works, because they also need to be educated before they enter into a deal with a multifamily syndicator or a syndicator of any, because you need to be asking these questions like, hey, do you plan on getting a cost seg study done? Will I get my pro rata share, or is there verbiage in the contract that says the GPs take all the depreciation, which I've seen, right? And so you have to understand, are the GPs flowing down your pro rata share of depreciation, or are they keeping it? So you have to know and arm yourself to be able to ask the right questions, to be able to know which syndicatorship you want to enter into a relationship with, because that's what it is. It's a relationship, and relationships should be transparent. So it's really, this is why we're here, right? We're here to arm people with the tools and the knowledge to be able to ask the right questions. And ultimately, like I told you, Lance, right? Just like pretty much every profession out there, not everybody's created equal, right? And the same goes for my industry, the cost seg industry.
Yeah, let's touch on that too, because I mean, as you can see, there's lots of moving parts here. It's very technical. So I think the first thing is, accounting firms or CPA firms like ourselves, this is beyond the scope of what we can do. Like, what we do is we take whatever Bedford gives us, because it's an engineering study. Like, it's a total different thing. And as I think Frank is alluding to, is that there's a bunch of people running around that are claiming to do, not claiming, they're doing cost segregation studies. So maybe share a little bit with us is that not all people who do the studies are created equal. What does that mean?
Yeah.
What's the risk of, I think it's because it's more about they're not created equal, and it ends up creating, this is the real estate risk report. There is some risk that you can be pregnant with if you don't really understand who's doing the study.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, the IRS didn't do the cost segregation industry any favors by basically saying that you just needed to have a background in engineering and construction principles to be able to be a provider. Okay. Yeah. It left it very vague and open. There's no IRS, state or federal certification. I mean, literally, you just need to have a background in construction and engineering principles. And oh, by the way, you have to use a certain type of estimating software. it really left the door wide open. And so when that 2004 cost segregation audit technique guide was published by the IRS, every Tom, Dick, and Harry across the United States decided to open up a cost seg, shop. And it became the wild, wild west. So basically what ended up happening was in 2006, the more legitimate, and there's no other way to say it, the more legitimate cost segregation providers nationally came together and said, listen, we need to separate ourselves from the rest and come up with a way to a certification process, an education, a code of ethics, standard operating procedures. And so what was basically born was the American Society of Cost Segregation Professionals, the ASCSP, American Society of Cost Segregation Professionals. 2006 is when it was founded. Bedford Cost Segregation's claim to fame was that, basically our managing partner, founder, owner, Greg Bryant, was one of the original founders of this ASCSP, as well as the first president. And so, bottom line is this American Society of Cost Segregation Professionals took it on themselves to really set up an entire training course, educational, a test. You had to have a certain number of years of being in the cost seg industry. You couldn't just walk in, pass the test, and be what's called a certified cost segregation professional. So they set up a platform for people who really wanted to take the industry seriously and do it right, okay? Because here's where the risk comes into play. If you have somebody who, and again, call me biased, but the American Society of Cost Segregation Professionals has a whole directory of members, okay? Yeah. And beyond the membership, it also has who are the certified cost segregation professionals, which means they had 7 years of cost seg experience. They took the test, they passed the test. Okay, and this test is everything from cost seg case law over the past 20 years, engineering principles, code of ethics, everything. So this is not a test that you can just walk into and pass. You literally have to go through all the certification. So a certified cost segregation professional is, to me, the highest level of cost segregation industry professional status. To date, Lance, I think the last time I checked, there were 43 people. In the entire United States, there are only 43 people who have the certified cost segregation professional status. Of those 43 people, Bedford has 8 of them. So we believe in using the American Society of Cost Segregation Professionals as the platform to vet cost seg providers. If you're working with a cost seg provider or your general partners are working with a cost seg provider who is not part of this American Society of Cost Segregation Professionals and doesn't have at least one certified cost segregation professional on staff, you're putting yourself at risk. And here's where you're putting yourself at risk. If that cost segregation study ever gets audited, there could be major impact to giving back all those accelerated depreciation deductions you benefited from 3 years ago. The IRS now comes in and starts poking holes at what was claimed for personal property, what was claimed for land improvements. Why was so much money being allocated to this asset, and why wasn't enough money being put towards the structure itself, right? I mean, let's face it, the structure of a building, the structural components is usually the most expensive. Mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems. So, what happens is the IRS starts digging into these studies, and now all of a sudden, the depreciation you claimed 3 years ago now becomes this. And you're giving back depreciation deductions. You're paying penalties. You're paying interest on the depreciation deductions you took. There's a whole rat's nest of things that can go wrong. And so this is why you need to make sure you're vetting your cost seg provider. You want to make sure you're working with someone who is on the up and up and is doing these studies properly. They're not being pressured by meeting the estimate that was originally proposed upon, because that's what happens in our industry. we basically put together an estimate of benefits. And if the estimate of benefits, the numbers seem to make sense, then you move forward with that cost segregation provider. But now, once you get that study, Lance, from that cost segregation provider, you're locked into those numbers. And let's face it, a lot of these cost segregation providers know that the CPA and the client will have no idea whether or not those numbers are legit. They just won't know. They don't know how to digest a report. They just give blind faith into using this document that's saving them hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars in tax savings. Sure, let's use it. So, to me, and it's always funny, right, Lance, because I'm constantly sending estimates out. And one of the biggest things I get back is, well, I've been speaking to so-and-so, and their estimate of benefits is getting 25% more. They're estimating 25% more in accelerated depreciation deductions. And I have to kind of give a quick timeout, and I have to explain, hey, listen, these estimates, I can tweak a simple number and it'll skyrocket the results through the roof. But I'm being conservative, right? You want someone who's going to give you a conservative estimate of benefits, not a liberal and a high-end results, because here's what happens. When that cost seg provider puts in an estimate and their results are through the roof and it's a very liberal estimate of benefits, now all of a sudden the engineer who's forced to do the study feels compelled to have to meet those results on the estimate. Because who wants to go back to the client and say, hey, it looks like I was 50% high on my estimate. So now what happens is what behind the scenes, the engineer gets his arm twisted to make sure you meet my estimate results because I don't want to give the client bad news. So now the engineer who's doing the actual study is inflating the results of the report just to meet the estimate. And so it's a dangerous game. And so I tell people, you don't want to put yourself in a position where you're trusting blind faith a study that's going to generate significant tax savings for you. Make sure you do your due diligence, ask the right questions. I mean, I have a one-page, 10-question questionnaire that I send to all my clients who I know are competitively bidding me. And I say, hey, listen, before you competitively bid my proposal to my competitions, make sure you ask them these 10 questions. Because if they can't answer these 10 questions confidently, they're not on the same playing field as Bedford, and I don't want my pricing to be compared to theirs.
Yeah, no, that's right. Because ultimately, I'm sure there's not really any recourse back to the people who did the cost seg study. The IRS is saying the taxpayers, at the end of the day, that's right.
So listen, and this is the other kind of dirty little secret, is that a lot of cost seg providers claim that all of their studies come with a 100% audit defense guarantee. Mm-hmm. I will be honest. I would not want to test that 100% audit defense guarantee with some of these providers that are out there. Bedford, we have professional liability insurance. We also have, the 100% audit defense guarantee. Knock on wood, we have a flawless record with over, 15,000 studies completed to date. I mean, it's really, and again, and what's even more scary, Lance, is that, there are name brand cost segregation providers out there right now that you would, just because of their popularity and their marketing tactics, you would think that you have no concern, you can use their study, no need to ask questions or do any sort of a vetting, just based on how many people have used them and blah, 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 blah. It's scary because I know some bigger names out there that don't even have one certified cost segregation professional on staff. And you're taking a risk. And quite honestly, as a general partner in a syndicatorship, it blows my mind why they would take the risk of using a cost segregation provider who doesn't have the proper credentials. Because now think about being in your position, the rat's nest of a possible audit and having to go back through all those K1s of the passive investors, because it affects more than just the GPs. It affects anybody who took accelerated depreciation deductions. So again, that's why we're here, Lance, because we want to arm the passive investors with the right questions to ask to their GPs.
That's right, because everyone, that's the side said, partnership accounting, partnership tax, for all that benefit of the depreciation, it's a double-edged sword, right? And so, and the IRS, as we all know, they don't screw around. And it's just that whole notion of, there's some of those regulatory dogs out there that don't bite, right? The IRS is not one of them. They bite, and they don't screw around. And so to test them is just foolishness, right?
Yeah.
And that's how they see it, because you never know.
And unfortunately, Lance, a lot of people just think, you know what? I'm gonna go with the cheapest cost seg provider, and I'm just gonna roll the dice that the IRS will never even sniff. And here's what I tell people, during these times, remember those dates I gave, September 27th to December 31st of 2022. During these times of 100% bonus,
scrutiny,
there are millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars per client that are being saved because of this 100% bonus. So what I tell people is, don't think once the IRS does kind of catch up, don't think that they're going to start doing look backs over the past 3 years to try to see, why, somebody who should be paying, the Jeff Bezos of the world should be paying hundreds of millions of dollars of taxes are not paying anything.
Well, especially too, is that when you have administration that came in and passed this and is no longer there, so now all those friendlies who are going to be appointed to these other places are going to be more of the other type, and they're going to be scraping for dollars. Let's face it.
Exactly.
The whole pandemic has many ripple effects and those things. And I think that all of the authorities who have the power to tax, whether the municipalities, state governments, federal government, don't kid yourself. There's shortfalls, and they'll go find places. And that's not to scare people. But of course, I'm the same way. It's like there's this risk. That's why I talk about this stuff. Is that there's this risk that just gets overlooked. These various risks. This is one of them. As it pertains to this, you have the benefit, but you got the risk. And it's the same thing with me. It's just the whole misappropriating funds. And to me, it's terrifying. The fact that no one's looking over and there's no oversight on these things, and the popularity is booming. It's just that, and it's opaque as far as the limited partner is concerned more often than not. And it to me, it's terrifying. It's a risk. The premium one should be compensated for not having any oversight, is far greater than whatever they're getting now, in my opinion, right? And so it's all these things. This is what I mean. To become a better investor, you can't just be. You need to know this stuff, right? So it's a bit of like you become an active passive investor, right? It doesn't mean that passive doesn't mean that you just wire money out and don't pay attention to anything. You need to educate yourself if you're going to play in this space. And it's no different than, investing in the stock market or whatever. With everything you do, it's your money, for God's sakes. You have to take it seriously. You can't just, you can't just invest in things blindly and then and not have done your homework. That's to me, I call it gambling. And even gamblers are more thorough than that. So
exactly. Yeah. It's we're on the same page. And the funny thing is, I'm talking like literally the difference of a few $1,000s of fixed fee to do a cost seg study, and people, general partners, will literally go with a lower provider because they're going to save $3,000. And I'm thinking to myself, $3,000 spread out amongst every limited and general partner who has. Let's face it, these cost seg study costs all get rolled into the overall investment. So $3,000 spread out over however many investors, and they're willing to just take the $3,000. They think they're saving themselves, but to me, it's penny wise and pound foolish, because the amount of headache it will cause later on down the line, you just can't. You can't put a price tag on it.
You can't. It's a rounding error. I get
Yeah.
it. And that's just it. I mean, love human beings. It's great, but at the end of the day, there's many ways we got thinking errors and blind spots and the rationality of how we, process
Well,
things
it's
is,
and you know what, Lance? Let's face it, right? Like I understand. I was in that construction world where every little penny matters because it all adds up. But you have to be smart about what pennies you're trying to save. To me, yeah, you can get the value add, right? All these multifamily syndicators, they all want to do improvements to the units. So maybe instead of doing granite countertops, do Corian countertops to save yourself some money. But don't save yourself $3,000 on a cost seg study that's generating hundreds of thousands of millions of tax savings. It's you got to be smart about where you're cutting your corners. So,
I agree.
that's
I
that's
totally
that's what
agree.
we're here for.
So where can people find you, Frank? How do they learn more about
Well,
what you and your firm?
yeah, I mean, listen, I am the best way is email, right? And I'm assuming a lot of people are probably going to reach out to you, Lance, possibly, and you have my contact information to send my way. My email address is FG as in George, IU, D as in David, ICI at bedfordteam.com. And or give me a jingle. My number is 518-898-6603. Again, 518-898-6603. I'd love to chat. Much like you, Lance, I'm a big believer in educating people, giving them the tools to arm themselves. And it's done me well so far in my career, and I think people appreciate that. So I'm more than happy to enlighten people.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's what you've taught me a lot about the biz on your side, and I've been appreciative of that. And yeah, he's there to help the rest of you too. So, well, thanks so much, Frank. I appreciate you taking the time, and we'll be in touch.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Lance.
Yep. See ya.